I'm here with Zefren-M. He is a textile and jewelry artist. Zefren, tell people where you're from.
Hello, Yacht. I'm Zefren Anderson. I'm from Shiprock, New Mexico, in northwest corner of New Mexico, near the Four Corners on Navajo Reservation. My clans are Mud, Many Houses, Red House, and Salt.
Behind you, we have you sitting in front of a loom, and I wanted to start with your early beginnings with weaving. My question is, how did you get started?
Well, I have weavings on both sides in the maternal lineage of both my dad and my mother. My mother is Mud Clan, one of the main groups of weavers that all Two Gray Hills weavers are descended from. And they have a very interesting oral tradition and actual family history that isn't really documented. That the weaving narrative that is available in the Western view is somewhat not what I was taught listening to that. And then on my dad's side, they were all weavers before they switched to wage work when oil was discovered on their grazing lands. So I had stories of chief blankets, going up to Canada, trading blankets for horses. And then on my mother's side, how weaving has kept families together and warm, how it is a nexus for survival. And in that, both of them didn't practice weaving enough in front of me because I lived with my Nellies, which is my dad's parents. So I just had stories. And at school they would give little kits for everyone to weave, and I wove this little 6x6 weaving that was like a red background with an hourglass. And I did that back when I was 7. And my grandmother on my mom's side actually helped me finish that because she made me unweave the whole thing and weave it back. And she didn't speak English, so it was just, we spoke with our hands. And it wasn't until visually pleasing to her that she allowed me to keep weaving it. And, it went into storage. And when I came back to take care of my dad, I came across this weaving. And I felt like, wow, this would be a good way for me to stay at home, watch him, and still earn a living. Even though, my maternal grandmother was very hesitant because I'm male to teach me how to weave. But on my dad's side, they were all for it. Like, you need to do this. And, these are the places. She told me stories of where her mother hid these bundles of tools and weavings in times when, if you feel like it, you can go out here and go get them. So I came back to the reservation in 2008, and around 2010, I found my little weaving from grade school, and it reminded me of all the old stories. So in that same year, I bought plastic yarn, acrylic yarn, and I lacked the tools, and I didn't have much money back then. So I went back to the stories. I went back to my parental grandmother's grazing lands, and I tried to remember the locations that she had the stories of where the bundles were at. And out of the 3 that she talked about, there was only one that I successfully found because erosion and just time had taken the other 2. So I went there, and in this old house where the roof was collapsing, in the place that she talked about, there was this huge, kind of like if you put it in your arms, you still have quite a bit of space between your hands. And I took it out, and it started crumbling as soon as I started taking it into the sunlight. And out of that whole bundle, there were 6 different weavings. Only the inner 2 weavings and the tools actually, they're intact, like they don't degrade exposing to air. And from that, those tools and the weavings there, I went on a self-discovery of learning of weaving, trying to remember, refining my interlock technique, and then realizing, weaving with plastic yarn, that I didn't have first-hand knowledge of how to do everything. I've only had the stories. So that's when I started the apprenticeship with Master Weaver Roy Cady. And between 2015 to 2018, we had this exchange of knowledge where, I'd help him with his sheep or help him with his work in exchange for learning how to do things from scratch and reconnecting with the land. Because once I was there with his sheep, a lot of memories with my grandma's sheep came back, and the connection to the land was reestablished. And then that's when my aunts and my mom said, "Well, it's natural because what ties you to the land is in the same area as your parental grandmother's corral. So it's no wonder why you're going back to that." I'm very thankful for Roy's teachings and the people he introduced me to. He was the primary motivation for me to get into Swaya and the herd. I'm forever grateful for, that experience, because I wouldn't be here without him. I wouldn't be here without his mother, his grandmother, and their sheep, because we don't have that anymore in our family. Experiencing it when I was like 4, 3, 5, herding sheep, and doing it now, it feels like the two memories of so long ago and now are connecting. And it really drives my art, because a lot of it is rooted in the past, and that's exactly what I do with my weavings now.
Well, what are you doing now?
Well, I'm trying to keep what people call tradition and cultural knowledge alive. I'm one of those that kind of like, I like the word tradition when it's not used in the context of exclusivity and exclusion, because a lot of people say traditional and already the fence goes up, and they say like you can't know what I know. And I try to let people say, I say traditional, but all it means is just that these things are the way things were done in the time before I was born. It's not a barrier to keep you out or exclude you. So, and what's considered traditional, if we just use that term for these purposes, has always evolved, considering what materials were available at the time. At some point, I'm sure that our weavers never strayed far from yucca or any other plant fiber and looked at suspicion at cotton and any other fiber. And now we haven't worked with cotton in almost 400 years, and we have stories about working with cotton, but no one has worked or grown these fibers in such a long time. And that's part of what I do now, is like, we have archaeological and ethnographic evidence that I can look at and experiment with, and then you can take the stories, and then these ways of living and how to do things back then come back into the present, and they teach you things on how to incorporate new ideas into what would be the traditions of the future. And that cultural knowledge as a whole is always adapting. Sometimes it goes back, sometimes it moves forward, sometimes it stays present. And it's that that movement of this, and accepting new ideas but not forgetting the old ways, that has made the present very adaptable, a very powerful tool that all cultures around the world have used to survive when new things or bad things or good things happen. It makes it survivable life, and it gives children and the future an era of hope that nothing is truly unknown, but we're always prepared for it regardless. And I just love fiber in general, because I could work with yucca, I could work with cotton, I could work with wool, and a lot of my experiment is trying to get back, identifying shepherds and sheep that have characteristics of wool from the 1700s, because I'm not a good weaver unless I nurture where my fiber comes from, whether it's a plant, this area that grows yucca, or this masane or her grandchildren that are raising sheep in the way that I need it. And I do all of that because there are some weavings now that require a wool that a lot of people don't breed for anymore, but there are still people out there that have that. And it's just maintaining those cultural relationships with your materials. That even goes to, like, I still buy machine spun acid dyed yarns for some weavings because of the amount of wear they're going to get, or people are actually going to use them for warmth. So it's knowing when new materials are appropriate, what's traditional, and just working with the conflict between the two. I just love that. Like, I wouldn't use acrylic now because acrylic is a petroleum based product, and all of petroleum based products are exploitive. And our family had oil in our land, and 80 years after it stopped producing oil, it didn't benefit anyone in my generation. And people always sell this idea that we need to have these resources extracted to make a better future. But I've seen the other side of it. It's like that benefit in future only lasts 2 generations, and then you're back to where you were at. I would rather have the oil stay in the land, and the water wells and the springs that used to be there still be there, because they changed afterwards. I guess it's just all of that. When I weave, all of these histories and everything come back to me, and I just love that. And then making things alive that people are generally scared of, because that was so far back in the past that people are scared of the past, rightfully so, because people are always afraid of repeating things that our ancestors did. I look at it and I see these fragments, and I can make the weavings and realize that a lot of people now are following the mistakes that they did, and that we know where it's going to end up, and we're still going towards that ultimate goal. And it's always the conflict as an artist, because what makes us successful right now is financial security, but you can so easily turn that into wealth gathering, and that doesn't benefit anyone but one person. And I try to tell people, like, if I ever get that way, call me out on it, because I don't want to go down that path, because it's not sustainable. I know a lot of artists, that's the biggest thing, to stay humble and to keep their art relevant to their culture. With me, I have that, and then trying to take it to new places, and being an activist. It's an interesting experience. I've never had such the feelings of life because of it. I hope that my life as a whole, when it's all said and done with, is that I inspire other people to view life and critically and analyze things, and never forget the past, the present, and the future in what they do. It just turns into this. I can't think about it. It's just what you see in front of you. Like, if you see what the picture behind me and my art. A lot of people aren't bold enough to wear their clothing that was woven in the style and worn in the style that was 200 years ago. I still have arguments that Navajo traditional clothing 100 years ago is nothing but fur skins and cedar bark, when really that was like thousands of years ago. All our cultures had different levels of sophistication when it came to clothing, and it changed with the climate, because in this area that we live in, there have been times where it's been very dry and hot, and living here seemed to be, you need to leave. And then other times where it's just bountiful, with game and natural materials, and other times where it's very plains-like. And our clothing has reflected that. And I think each culture still maintains the stories of, like, it doesn't make sense now because you're not wearing or experiencing the weather back then. So my picture in this one reflects that. Everything you see me wearing there, I made with my own hands, I wove. And, you know, I wear that in public sometimes just to tell other people, like, you know, make things for yourself and wear them proudly. Because the way that we dress is beyond a green cotton velveteen shirt that has roots with army uniforms and Christian missionaries telling men you can't make your clothes. Wearing pants when, you know, all of us around here before the times of horses would, you know, leggings, kilts are just simple wraps. I try to do that, you know, to help everyone around me uh, by sharing what I know, you know. So in the 400 years, if someone finds a little fragment of one of my blankets, that fragment will teach them and put them on the journey that I've been on the same way, you know, going to this one museum in Colorado had an impact on me because they had a weaving that is 1,200 years old that in all regards you couldn't tell was that old. You could say, oh, it's just an oversized saddle blanket woven in the 50s. This weaving did not have, you know, scary intentions. It did not feel negative. In fact, you know, you got to this weaving and you can still hear the songs of the woman who wove it. And it was woven out of love that her descendants and everyone that this blanket kept warm would still be around until the next way of living for our peoples is going to come, whatever that might be. That's why I think us as artists, we see that, you know, a lot of our work is going to be there after our story's done, done being saying or written about.
What are you working on from from what you're working on now to your future? What you see happening for you in the future? Um, can you talk to us about what you're thinking on about your future?
It's that my weavings, my art, whether it's the jewelry or the weavings, you know, has that effect of being able to convey the entire philosophy of who we are as artists. Um, in Navajo, we have a kind of like generalized motto of living that's called Sa Naye Pekehojo. Um, you know, generalizing that whole saying because it's a whole series of songs. When you hear this saying in the traditional ceremonies, that it comes up, but it's old life or the future of, you know, the journey of getting there between the ways of the warrior or negativity through the positivity of balance and family or kingship. You get there. um, it's that. It's like, I hope that, you know, there's enough people in the future that still have that teaching that realize that these things we're making is still reinforcing that way of critical thinking and analyzing life. You know, that good we were good humans. We were good members of our tribe, our clans, respectful to our culture, mother, and history. And that people can see this, that we are a living, breathing, awesome person or being with the five fingers we have and the air we breathe. What a lot of Pueblos, you know, fight against is like the ancestral Pueblo are a disappeared people, and there's a barrier to that to the living Pueblos now. And you know, the weaving said, no, you're the same people. You have a continuous line of knowledge that intersects every tribal group in the Southwest. And you know, I'm bold enough to say all of North and South America and even the Arctic, we all have a connection to that. That we're not separate groups, that we have a common origin. That leads my weavings to that, that activism of, having to include me as a queer artist, to make safe spaces for future queer artists that are learning the language, learning the art, and carrying on the culture, simply because that is the role that they find themselves in. And we're in that role simply because the world is biased against our way of being. I want that for future person who looks at us, I would like to think that our culture is still alive and that. But if it's not, if we moved on to a different way of existence or living, that they look back at this and it still teaches them a lesson that they will learn in the future. That we're good people, that we have critical minds, we did the best that we could for them. And hopefully, we do things right. I would like to think millions of years versus thousands. We hope for 100, but I would be really sad if like everything that we're doing now doesn't go on the next 2 generations. We always say we're going and looking into 8 generations ahead, because my family stories talk about Chaco Canyon as 8 generations behind us. So that 8 generations, 800 years seems to be the the whole cycle process between all that's happening. 1300s would have been the last, so 800 from 1300, 2100 is the next big flip. And it's amazing how things are lining up to that.
What are your thoughts about the business side of things for yourself?
Well, and that's where, the teaching of balance comes in. It's like you have to be positive about it, but it's still a competition of sorts. Instead of, trying to be negative towards, other people as a person, I try to make my work speak for itself. So I defend my work and my weavings and what I'm doing. I try to encourage others, even those that other people say copying, but I would say inspired by what I'm doing, because in a way that is still what I'm doing, continuing. So I still think that works. And as a business part of it, I'm fed. I keep the house warm for my dad and myself. That requires me making sales and doing all good business decisions. And I'd like to think that, me as an artist, I'm not taking more than what I need. And if you feel, that is something you want to support, you can find me on Instagram at Zefren_M, or Facebook, Zefren the Artist, or Zefren Artists. Find my page. But if you just put Zefren-M, I think in the search on Facebook, you'll find me. I prefer people, like if they're interested in the art, to stick to my artist page. If they want to know the nitty gritty of my personality and my quirks, they can request me as a friend. And I have the Artspan platform that is, so graciously partnered with Swaya and everything. I have that, and it's also Zefren-M, and I do have my regular page, which needs to be updated, is www.zefren-m.com. But you can go to Swaya and look up artists, and I'm there too. And I have my Artspan page. Currently working on the 2001 inventory, so all I have is just what I have on that store. And I like to encourage people who are interested in Native American art, Pueblo art, Navajo art, Plains art, Arctic. I wish there were more Pacific Islanders. And look at everyone's art. Art is very personal, and it's a lifetime commitment when something speaks to you. And I hope there's a lot of stuff that I have that speaks personally to the collectors, that they love what they see and what they have more than you just thinking of me. I like them to know that art, because that way when it gets taken out of my hands, I'm proud that it's there and loved versus thinking of art as an extension of myself. Because, you know, there's only so much of me versus person falling in love with, you know, what is the being of my creations.
Zefren, thank you for talking with us and sharing information about how you got started, what you're doing now, and how you see the future for yourself and others. We appreciate this, and want to tell viewers to visit swaya.org, see the artist, and see the other media content we have that helps support our artists. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.